Leaders' questions. I call on Deputy O'Keefe.
Tánaiste by Crinumolly Ganentus Yorpa Chamairach. Tánaiste, there's an EU summit tomorrow. And as Minister of Foreign Affairs, are you concerned that EU policy is now being proposed by Merkel and Sarkozy instead of by the Commission? And what they are proposing will not deal with the current crisis, but is more driven by a federalist agenda. We in Fianna Fáil have said time and again that the only solution to the European problem is the ECB becoming the lender of last resort, with burden sharing across all member states. As effectively, the problems we face are not only that borrowers borrowed recklessly, but that the banks in the centre, in the core of Europe, lent recklessly as well. And this crisis was caused by a failure to regulate European and world banks and unrestricted free market policies. Can I ask you, Tánaiste, will the Taoiseach be tabling counter-proposals to the Sarkozy-Merkel proposals to the Commission, or has he at least discussed the issue with President Van Rompuy, or has he discussed the issue with other peripheral states? Can you confirm that the proposals on tax harmonisation that will affect our ability to design our own tax policies will be rejected out of hand? And will the Taoiseach tell his European counterpart that the proposed Merkozy treaty change is not the best option, that it might prove unacceptable to many countries, that it would happen too slowly,
Thank you.
and that it would not be as effective as the ECB adopting a proactive policy in dealing with the crisis?
Thank you, Deputy. Tánaiste.
Well, the European Council meeting, which will take place this evening and tomorrow, is, as Deputy O'Keefe said, a hugely important meeting for addressing the difficulties that we've seen over a period of time in the Eurozone. First of all, I think it is important to say that the formal proposals which are before that meeting are the proposals that were developed by President Van Rompuy as President of the European Council, which he was asked to do in October, and he has tabled a set of proposals for consideration by the European Council tomorrow. Separately, the leaders of Germany and France have put together a set of proposals. Obviously, they will be considered. But I think the first thing that we have to understand here is that the European Council is a council of 27 member states. It's not a council of 2 member states or 1 member state or a small number of states. It's 27, and there must be agreement reached across the 27. The approach which Ireland is taking to those discussions is, first of all, that we have to address the very real difficulties that there are with the euro and in the eurozone. It has been our belief for quite some time that those issues need to be addressed now, rather than have a prolonged period of treaty negotiation, as we know that treaty negotiation sometimes can take a very long period of time, and we have made it clear that we believe that it is possible to reach solutions and to reach resolution of those issues within the existing treaty framework, which would include the strengthening of the ESM, enhanced role for the ECB, and so on. In relation to the question of the role of the Commission, it has been Ireland's view for quite some time that the Commission must remain central to the way in which the European Union operates. That is what maintains the community approach to dealing with issues. On the proposals that have been made by President Van Rompuy, Ireland has put forward a set of observations on those proposals, which reflect our approach to dealing with the euro situation, but which also reflect our desires that this country's own national interests are protected fully in those discussions. And they have been set out in a letter which the Taoiseach has sent to President Van Rompuy. Finally, in relation to the issue of tax harmonisation, our view on this is well known and is consistent. We are not agreeable to change our corporate tax rate. There are proposals from the European Commission in relation to the CCCTB, which have been tabled some time ago. We're willing to have those discussed. I would have to say that other member states who had initially been quite enthusiastic about changes in respect of a CCCTB now appear less enthusiastic about that.
Thank you. Deputy O'Keefe.
First of all, I'm reassured that the Tánaiste realises that the method of operation of the European Union is by the 27 and propose the Commission. And I would hope that the Taoiseach would make that absolutely clear in public, that it is unacceptable that two countries try to dictate European policy across, and that it's actually contrary to the whole spirit of the European treaties. You talk about a letter that the Taoiseach has sent to the European Union. Since the letter sent by Merkel and Sarkozy has been made public, can I ask the Tánaiste whether he is willing to make that letter available to the public, as I think that would be very, very important, that that letter would be available so that we would know exactly what the Taoiseach is saying.
Thank you.
In relation to tax harmonisation, every time people mention CCCTB, I'm reminded of the old nursery rhyme of the spider and the fly. And you know what happened to the fly when he got into the web.
Like
and as far as I feel like concerned, as far as we are concerned, your acquiescence to the CCCTB proposal is buying the proposition that was put to the fly in the famous nursery rhyme of the spider and the fly.
Thank you very much.
I want to make it absolutely clear that as far as this government is concerned, there is no and there will be no dictation of policy by either one member state or by a small number of member states in relation to issues that have to be decided at the European Council. This is a European Council, this is a European Union of 27 member states, and the decisions that have to be arrived at on a collective basis. There is an immediate, very difficult situation that has to be addressed. It is our view as a government that that needs to be addressed urgently. The difficulties, the market instability that we have seen and the market uncertainty in relation to the euro and the concerns that there have been about the euro over a period of time, that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed quickly. There are two aspects to that, to addressing that. One is related to the kind of firewall that is put in place to ensure the protection of the euro, and secondly there are issues relating to governance within the European Union that has to be addressed. There is a debate, private members' debate on this entire issue, which is commencing after the order of business Ceann Comhairle, and I will be setting out more fully in my own contribution to that debate the government's position in relation to and the approach that we're taking to the meeting today and tomorrow.
Thank you. Deputy Doherty.
Ceann Comhairle. Tánaiste, this week your government and your party delivered a devastating budget which has hit the poorest hardest, and again we're seeing a government that is protecting the high earners. We've seen how government looks after its own party. The party hacks have been appointed as special advisers in high positions. Pay caps are being breached, and because you tell us that these people are worth it. Yet nothing is done for those on the dole, and we've seen the treatment that you have dished out to those in disability allowance, to those on lone parents, to those in community nursing homes. Tánaiste, today the European Central Bank's Governing Council meets, and it's widely expected that they will cut the interest rates once again. And this will be welcome news for at least for the 100,000 people out there who are in mortgage distress, who this government has abandoned, and many, many more. But last month, Tánaiste, we had this pathetic display of government who jumped up and down about the refusal of Bank of Ireland and of Ulster Bank to pass on the cut in the ECB interest rate to the hard-pressed mortgage holders. Ultimately, after some bluster, you simply did nothing. So, Tánaiste, it is completely and utterly unacceptable that banks who have received billions of euro in taxpayers' money refuse to pass on ECB interest rates, as we've seen last month and in previous months. These banks have been bailed out by the taxpayer. There's public interest directors on their boards of these banks. So, Tánaiste, what concrete steps is this government going to take to ensure that the expected ECB cut is passed on to every single mortgage holder out there?
Thank you. Tánaiste.
I think it is a pity that Deputy Doherty insists on spoiling what would otherwise be very good and valid issues that he raises by just naked exaggeration. When you say, for example, that this government has done nothing for those on the dole in relation to the budget, we protected the level of social welfare payment to those on job seekers, the basic rates of social welfare payment. And secondly, Deputy Doherty, we have included in the budget proposals a whole range of measures which are designed at getting people back to work, getting business moving again, and getting our economy to grow again. When you say, for example, that we have abandoned people who are in mortgage difficulties and who have difficulties with house repayments, you fly in the face of the truth. The reality is, in the budget, for example, we have increased the level of mortgage interest relief for people who bought at the height of the boom. The Minister for Finance made it clear that the measures contained in the Keane report are going to be implemented, and there will be an implementation programme for those. You are quite right, yes, that when the last reduction in the ECB interest rate was introduced, the government did call in the banks and did talk to the banks. Allied Irish Bank did follow the request that the government made to reduce the interest rate in line with the ECB. Most of the other financial institutions did likewise. Two of them didn't do so, and I would hope that on this occasion that they will do so. I understand that one of those financial institutions is today launching a new mortgage product which is designed at helping people who are having difficulties with their mortgages. But I want to be absolutely clear with you. This government is not only concerned about the issues and the difficulties that are faced by people with their mortgages, we have taken action on it and we are continuing to take action on it.
Thank you, Tánaiste. Deputy Dáil.
I could spend all day correcting you on the points that you've made. For example, mortgage interest supplement
this is a supplementary question.
and this is the question. But for example, mortgage interest supplement has been deferred, and payments have been cut by €22.5 million, and part-time workers will now not be eligible to the same type of social welfare benefit that they were eligible to previous. But Minister, the question is this, and you talk about that you hope that the banks will pass on the interest rate. Well, there are thousands of people that are hoping that this government will do something, and it is in your power not to be telling the banks that you hope they'll pass it on, to actually act decisively, to say to the banks that you have guaranteed, as a result of this decision by your government last week, that you have pumped billions of euro, €20.7 billion has been pumped into the banks since this time last year. I want you to say to mortgage holders out there that you will bring in legislation, that you will force the banks to pass on the ECB interest rate cut that is expected to be announced today. That is what people did when they elected a government. They asked them to act on behalf of their interests, not in the interest of the bank. So this kind of nonsense about ministers standing up and saying it's pathetic that the banks don't pass on the interest rates. You're in power. You have the power to cut social welfare rates, child benefit, one-parent families rates. You also have the power to instruct the banks to pass on this rate. So act on behalf of people's interests. Tánaiste.
This is the first government that brought in the banks and that addressed face up with the banks the issue of passing on the interest rate reductions. These were the same banks. These were the same banks that you, Deputy Doherty, in fulsome language, was so happy to guarantee a mere 3 years ago. I want to be absolutely clear with you. This government is dealing with the issue of mortgage difficulties that people have. We have increased the level of mortgage interest relief for people who bought at the height of the boom. We set up a working group to deal with the issue of mortgage difficulties. The report of that group was debated here in the House. The recommendations of that group are to be implemented, as indicated by the Minister for Finance in his budget speech, and there will be a plan for that. When the last decrease in interest rates occurred, the government called in the banks. If necessary, we will do that again. You need be in no doubt, Deputy Doherty. You need be in no doubt. You need be in no doubt, Deputy Doherty, that this government will act decisively, forcefully, and effectively with the banks and with anybody else in the interests of those who hold mortgages and who are having difficulty repaying them.
Thank you, Tánaiste. Deputy McGrath.
Thank you, Concora. Tánaiste, you've always said since the election that jobs were a key priority for this government, and I'm glad that Minister Richard Bruton is here for this discussion. And also, it would be a key priority. And this morning, again, we went back to it, you talked about getting people back to work. Now, we all accept that, and many people and many members of the technical group, for example, over the last few days have come into this House, put forward suggestions in relation to job creation and also in relation to the tax issue and supports for small businesses. So can I ask you this morning, Tánaiste, in relation to the whole thing of job creation and, more importantly, job retention, why are you now, today, and in yesterday's budget, why are you cutting 66.6% to the community employment schemes? And can I ask you, Tánaiste, this is a huge cut to many voluntary and community groups. Can I also ask you, Tánaiste, how can you say to those people that you're sharing the pain when you see high earners getting increases of 30 and 40 grand a year? How can you say that to the people on the community employment schemes, the people with disabilities, the people out there working in the drug services? Also, Tánaiste, are you aware that this is a direct attack on the 22,474 people in these projects that are providing a very valuable services? And some of these are in the disability sector. And now here we go again. They had to put up the last 24 hours over the disability allowance, and now here we go again. They're facing further cuts in the community employment scheme in the disability sector. And by the way, it's not a 20% cut or a 10% cut, it's a 66% cut in relation to the materials in that. So, Tánaiste, can I ask you now, in the Dáil today, to reverse these cuts? Thank you, Concora.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think we all agree in this House that the community employment schemes do great work in local communities and provide great opportunities for people to get work experience. And I want to assure the Deputy that this government is committed to the continuation of community employment schemes. The total amount of money which is being spent by the Department of Social Protection in relation to employment supports, including community employment schemes, is not being reduced. It is being increased this year. The total spend by the Department of Social Protection on employment support programmes will be €977 million in 2012. It was €882 million in 2011. Within that increased budget, there will be reforms in the way in which some of that money is being spent. There are differing circumstances applying to differing community employment schemes. In the case of some community employment schemes, their sponsors are statutory bodies who have separate budgets for education and training. In respect of other community employment schemes, there are access to differing levels of funds from differing sources. And within that framework, there is a reform and a review taking place of the total package of money to ensure that the best value for money is obtained. But let's be clear about one thing. The government is not closing down any community employment schemes, is not reducing the payments to community employment participants. The overall amount of money which is being provided for employment support programmes is being increased, and within that, certain reforms will be undertaken by the Department of Social Protection.
Thank you. Deputy McGrath.
Well, first of all, can I say that in relation to I accept the point about closing down, we accept that, but I didn't say that in my series of questions in the beginning. I was talking about the 66.6% cut to the funding to many community employment schemes. And can I ask you, Tánaiste, do you accept that this cut of 66% to community employment projects will result in loss of services to the low wage, the unemployed, people with disabilities, older persons, men, women and children? Will you accept that, first of all? And it's not an imagination. Also, Tánaiste, do you accept what the Northside Centre for the Unemployed in Coolock said yesterday, which is based in Coolock, said Dublin is appalled at the proposed savage budget cuts to the funding for community employment projects by way of 66.6% in cutting for training and materials. So that's the Northside Centre for the Unemployed in Coolock, which is an excellent service on the North Side. Also, can I also ask you, Tánaiste, would you accept that this budget cut will have the effect of community employment projects not being able to afford even the basic workplace health and safety training for their participants, which is mandatory under the health and safety legislation, never mind the progression-based training that participants need to move into mainstream employment? And more importantly, finally, Cancórla, can I ask the Tánaiste, more importantly, community employment acts as an active labour market programme. Can it function without the funds to provide an access to quality training for their participants? Thank you, Cancórla.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I don't accept at all the Deputy's contention that the changes that are being made in respect of the training payments for community employment schemes will result in a loss of services, nor do I accept that it will result in a loss of places on community employment schemes. In fact, the reverse is the case. As I've said, the overall package of money that's available for employment supports, including community employment schemes, is being increased. In addition to that, the jobs budget in May delivered over 20,000 new training and education places, and Minister Howlin announced a 20 million labour market activation fund that would create a further additional 6,500 places for the long-term unemployed. The Department of Social Protection will seek to minimise the effects of the changes on those who are affected. The Department will examine the income and expenditure of schemes with reference to their capacity to absorb some of these costs, as I've mentioned, in particular statutory organisations who in many cases have separate budgets for training and education. In addition, there are community and voluntary sponsoring organisations that receive funding from a multiplicity of state agencies, and these will be examined in terms of their ability to continue the programme with reduced funding from the Department of Social Protection. Finally, there are a number of schemes who, through activities supported under community employment, generate significant income, and they will also be included in the review. And the Department of Social Protection will work very closely with the Department of Education and Skills with a view to the provision of training for community employment participants. As you know, the FÁS community employment and the FÁS labour placement aspects have been now located in the Department of Social Protection. There is a revised and a reformed approach to the way in which labour activation, including the training and education side of labour activation, is going to be managed into the future. And the change that has been announced in the budget needs to be placed in that context, and as I've said, also in the context of the fact that the overall Department of Social Protection budget for employment supports is actually being increased next year.
Thank you. That completes Leaders' questions.